You eating dirt with a fork? Last year we built a really crazy raised bed garden, and every time I talk about it online I get tons of questions and comments about it, so I figured it was high time that I take the camera into the garden and show you an inside look. For more stories of life on our Wyoming homestead, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video every Tuesday. Come on, let's go. I'll show you inside the garden. You've got some onions. The cabbage is growing well, but my white cabbage moths are back again this year. They were really bad last year, so I need to whip up a batch of my homemade garden pest repellent and start spraying these guys every day. Otherwise, there won't be much to eat come fall. Last year, I planted my tomatoes way too close together, and guess what I did again? I think I learned lessons in the garden the hard way most of the time. I mostly plant paste tomatoes because that's what I love to can and preserve. But I also do some heirloom black tomatoes. I don't remember their fancy names at the moment, and some slicers and some cherry tomatoes. Okay, I can't get through the tomatoes here. Come on, guys. So we have the carrots. Now the carrots, we had a little issue this year. You know, carrots are slow to germinate, and the chickens got in here and scratched out a bunch of my rows. And then our growing season is short and I didn't have a chance to plant them again, or let's just say I forgot. So we're gonna have a smaller carrot harvest this year. And you know what, it's okay. One thing I've learned with gardening is you have bumper crops some years and scant harvests other years, and you know what, I'm really thankful to live in an era of the grocery store so I can add vegetables to our grocery list if I need to. Some beets and some basil. So we're under a tornado watch right now, which isn't that serious. It kind of happens a lot, but you never know when an afternoon like this is going to get really exciting around here. So weeds, well, they're still here, and I think the raised beds have helped me manage them better, but they've even come up on the edges of the weed fabric, and these are actually trees. And normally I love trees, but I really wish these would stop growing here, and they are so determined, which you gotta admire. I'm less concerned about the weeds that grow along here just because it's not really competing with the vegetables, although I don't want them to go to seed. And bindweed is the bane of my existence. If anybody has some bindweed strategies, please leave a comment, because this stuff will not die. And trust me, I pull it and pull it and pull it. My first planting of arugula has already gone to seed, so this is my second planting. It's doing really well. So this is my second planting of spinach, or at least a portion of it. And I've covered it with hardware cloth. It probably doesn't need it now, but when it was still coming up and very small, the chickens, if they did get in here on occasion, they always make a beeline to the beds with dirt because they love to scratch, and they would dig up all the little tiny tender seedlings. So the hardware cloth just does a good job of deterring them. So up at the front of the garden, I have our seating area with a little bit of perennials, some raspberries that I got from the distressed shelf at the store. And then over here, last year there were pumpkins, and I put potatoes there this year. You also see down here that this area of potatoes are not doing very good. There was a row there and a few here. just because they got a little too wet. There's too much moisture here kind of settling into this corner, and they did not like that. Powder, get out. So our raised bed story actually starts off really sad. So for several years, I had used a deep mulch method of gardening, and you can read about it on the blog. I'll link it below. It really worked well. I used tons of hay and layered it up, and it kept the ground moist, and there was worms, and everything was really happy. Until one year, I unknowingly used hay that had been sprayed with a really powerful herbicide, and I basically contaminated my garden, and that herbicide doesn't break down quickly. So I ruined my garden plot, and I was left with this problem of what do I do next? Once we decided to go with raised beds versus just trying to start over with our regular garden, we couldn't decide what to build them out of. We ended up going with steel bridge decking panels. Now, these are much thicker and much more sturdy than your regular, thinner galvanized panels. So we went ahead and put bolts into the corners of these and drilled them into redwood 4x4s. And this made our entire bed without having to build a whole frame out of wood. Note to self, make something with chard for supper tomorrow. I had some pumpkin seeds that did not germinate well this year, so you can see that half of my pumpkin bed is not awesome. The other half is awesome, and there are some little baby pumpkins coming. Hopefully you'll get some good pies out of these guys. There are 20 beds, and they're 4 foot by 8 foot each. At first, I thought 20 sounded like a crazy number, and I thought maybe I'd lost my mind. But now that I think about it, and I've gardened, now this is my second year with these beds, I probably could go for a few more. So on the one end of the garden, we have 2 gates. We can either approach the garden from the barnyard side or the yard side. And I also have a little bit of a perennial seeding area there. This is really the first time I've ever tried to make anything pretty in my garden. I mean, gardens are usually pretty by default, but I've normally been really utilitarian with my garden until this year. There's a bunch of volunteer dill in the cucumber bed, which I think is rather poetic. And then we have little baby cucumbers who are so cute. There they are, soon to be pickles. Green beans are doing well. They're about ready to eat. They're coming on strong. Little confession, I hate picking green beans, so I make the kids do it because it just is really monotonous feeling to me. I know. Well, I'm really kind of a crappy waterer, so Christian insisted if he was going to put all this work into the beds that he put in an automatic sprinkler system as well. And yeah, he was right, because I don't water very consistently, and funny thing, when you water stuff, it grows better. So now that we are on this automated timed sprinkler system, things grow really well because it doesn't depend on Jill to keep them watered. And so he put these in when he installed the beds. Each bed has 4 of these little mini sprinkler guys, and it works really well. They only run, I'd say probably max 15 minutes a day. So a couple of the questions I get the most when I talk about these garden beds, people want to know where I got the soil that we put in them. Well, we leveled the plot out here before we put the beds in and made a big pile of topsoil and just used that to refill the beds. The next question I get is, are the edges sharp? So I know in the pictures they look razor sharp and this looks like a death trap, but I promise they aren't as sharp as you think. Because this is a heavier type of steel and it's thicker, you know, you don't want to probably throw yourself on top of one of the edges, but I've leaned on them. I have kind of tripped over them. I pressed my hand into them. They're not that sharp. So here we have the peppers. I mostly planted poblanos this year because that's what I love to cook with. They make good pico de gallo. You can can them. They're not too spicy and they're growing super well. I started these little babies from seed in February. I get my seed from Baker Creek. I'll link them in the notes below. And they've grown so well the last 2 years. But guys, I don't think that raised beds are necessarily for everyone. It really depends on what you want to grow and where you live and all of those sorts of factors. However, they worked really well for us. I love how they look. I love how they let me keep the garden more organized. I feel like it's easier to manage, and it's just been a really, really great option for us. Like more info about our raised beds, I made a special full color PDF handbook just for you. You can grab it for free with the link below. And this died. I don't know why. I cannot grow things in pots to save my life. No. Stop. There you go. Good boy, Powder. Good boy. You got him. You got him.